Mark Heather. I really enjoy talking about technology. Mark is a true technologist. He's from the United Kingdom, and he has a really impressive background. He helped lay down the fiber optics in the 80s for the underground railway system there in London. And he talks about what was involved there. But he found his way through many different offerings in technology and eventually in security, where he ended teaming up with an American who was deep in security as well. They ended up making this one corporation that helps small to medium businesses with security compliance. I'm not sure what you know about that, but there are certain compliances that have to be kept in a particular industry. For example, here in the States, HIPAA is in healthcare, where there's certain record keeping and there's certain areas that everything has to be compliant to that HIPAA compliance. So their software helps organizations do that. And with managed service providers, which I was a former one, their clients need this help in compliance. So they've created this platform that help in that. They are part of the ConnectWise PitchIT program, which is an incubator. There's 25 vendors in it this year that are all kind of competing for a prize and getting much exposure. But it's great talking to Mark. I enjoy perspective, and I love seeing solutions that come out of MSPs that help other MSPs and ultimately small to medium-sized businesses. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission: how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family, in their passion, in their careers, and how it helped them. Our podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. So I will be having conversations with a lot of the coaches and the finalists from 2023, and just kind of talking about them a little bit and their solution in some future podcasts. We want to make kind of an introduction to that as well.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, like I said, as the years progress, more people are getting involved, and then back to these vendors looking for a way to create a name for themselves with consistency. They need people like you, which is why I'm so thrilled that you're willing to work with me and work with us on this. So you're going to be you've graciously accepted to host these, and I appreciate that. Where you'll interview all our contestants. You're also going to interview last year's head coaches, last year's judges, last year's finalists. So you're doing all that. And I think it's important, for if you're a vendor and you're watching these, take note of this and how you get more involved. Watch the program. Watch what these men and women are all doing with us, because they're doing a lot. That's how you grow your business. If you're an MSP, watch these things. Get to know who people are and then inquire, because you're all looking to have stack alignment and you're all looking for credible and reputable businesses. We're vetting them out for you. We're putting them on display for you. Watch them, ask questions, find out, do your due diligence. Don't wait until IT Nation Connect to see you like at a booth and then buy 5 or 6 different technologies that you don't need.
So 2024 PitchIT, ConnectWise PitchIT. What's new and exciting about it?
Oh my Lord. So for those that have not followed any of this, I took over the PitchIT program 2 years ago, and we've had such great success, with like really great success. And went from, it's become one of the most predominant programs in the space now. Matter of fact, I was doing some research the other day, and about 5 or 6 other pitching things have spun off from mine and from ConnectWise PitchIT with other people that are running it. So it's great to see because I think it's the thing about Pitch It is it's all about innovation. It's all about being daring and willing to do things right. I mean, as an entrepreneur, it's a scary situation. You have to be ignorantly optimistic, and you have to be willing to maybe fail a lot more than you'll succeed, and you have to have very thick skin. But you
Mm,
always have to be innovative and creative. So it's nice to see that this has spun off into other groups that have started doing it because I think the hardest challenge for most startup vendors is getting their name out there, right? Getting people to know that they exist. And the reality of it is you can't just be there one time. You have to show consistency. You have to be in there for the long haul
mm,
for the partners to really be able for you to establish credibility, right? Because there's been plenty of fly by night businesses that have came out big and gone in 6 months. And for partners, their whole business is built around these vendors, these products. So they're making lifelong business decisions off of these.
mm.
So it's great, it's exciting, but back to the program itself, it's jumped leaps and bounds. It went from being just a competition where they picked a few people, a few really good product companies to pitch at live at IT Nation Connect, to where we turn into an accelerated incubator program for it's a season. It's literally a competitive season now at this point.
Hmm.
And went from 5 or 7 or maybe even 10 vendors that are involved until they narrowed down to 3 to 2 years ago was 18. Last year was 26.
Wow.
And we had way more applications than that. That was just the ones that we thought were the best fit.
Hmm.
So yeah, we're getting ready to put out the press release in a couple of days because then the application process will start February 1st. So I recommend anybody from around the entire globe to apply. We've had over just last year alone 6 different countries represented between the U.S., Canada, to Israel, to Australia, to New Zealand, to the U.K. They all involved in this competition.
Mark, Heather, I'm very, very excited to talk to you. Thanks so much for your time today. I'm glad technical difficulties are aside. What comparisons, Mark, do you draw? What are the similarities between coaching or managing a football or soccer team and cybersecurity?
Right, good question. From my point of view, it's actually sort of laying things out and mapping things out. So you've got to look
Mm,
at the overall. You need to know what your overall, forgive the pun, the overall goal is. But then you need to set out your structure for how you're going to achieve that goal, and you can break that down into um, defense, midfield, forwards, different patterns, looking at things from different angles. And you also have to react to what's happening on the pitch. And in cybersecurity, you have to react to what's happening in real life. And uh, as of today's date, the CrowdStrike
yes.
Microsoft thing,
Yeah,
everybody's
huge.
reacting. They've at least got a plan B. They know what the problem is, so they're becoming, offensive against what the threat is effectively. And we have to do the same in cybersecurity as you do when you're playing soccer. If you're being overwhelmed by the opposition, you need to come out with a way of counterattacking effectively. So
Hmm.
that's the similarities that I would try and draw a parallel with there. It would be, have an idea of what your end goal is, build backwards to see how you're going to protect that. And then, if anything, you need to be able to react quickly to any changes.
Yeah, and just a quick, what you mentioned about CrowdStrike and Microsoft. That's grounded thousands of flights here in the states. It's they know what the problem is. It's just amazing how an oversight like that can affect so many people. And I think another parallel that we should talk about, Mark, is just sticking to the basics. Right, in soccer, I see these coaches sometimes overcoach, right? But you still have to make good passes. You still have to possess the ball. You still have to, and it's the same thing in security, right? We still have to maintain good passwords. We still have to, use good, email hygiene. There's still some fundamentals
Exactly.
that we should really stick to.
Yeah, exactly. If you, like you say, you can make things overcomplicated,
Mm,
and certainly that's the case, if you like, with what appears to happen with CrowdStrike, because they do lots of things. When you, like you say, you do one patch and you misspell a letter, or you put a full stop in the wrong place, and as we've seen, it causes chaos for everybody else. And being able to do the basics, which is make sure configuration is correct. At the end of the day, with cybersecurity, the weakest link is going to be the human, and
mm.
that's something which, to a certain extent, we can't mitigate against. We can do as much as we can. We try and protect our systems with um, all these solutions that are out there. But if those solutions become too complicated, then you know, that's where the errors occur. And people do get lazy. You're told to do patches here, there, and everywhere. Even down to simple things like when you first receive a machine, did you change the default password?
Mm.
Chances are, if you've got 150, 200 machines to provision, you're just going to, you're going to miss the simple stuff.
Hmm. Did you turn off RDP?
Yeah.
Right? These
Yeah.
kinds of simple things, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think it's real valid, and yeah, the human ends up being the stop. Isn't that the saddest thing? I mean, with all this technology, still somebody opens up a terrible email, and they let people in. It's just
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody. It's all part of a big team, And what do you like most about coaching? Now, you coach U11 to U16, under
Yeah,
16.
under 11s to under 16s is the teams and I took them from under 11s through. Um,
Ah,
because I used to play soccer, as you in the States would call it, to quite a high level. So um, I've always sort of been relatively fit, and then football gave me up, or soccer gave me
mm,
up,
mm,
rather than
mm,
me giving
mm.
it up. When I couldn't catch the 21-year-old anymore, and I couldn't kick him if I couldn't catch him, then
Mm, mm,
I figured it was time to move to the next stage, and that was football coaching, and just really getting kids out onto the field rather than stuck in front of a screen,
mm,
and getting them to
mm.
interact with the rest of the world effectively, and put some sort of discipline and structure into their game and into their daily life. That's what I enjoyed about it. And as I say, we stuck together from under 11s to under 16s, and they developed doing different skills, because as humans they get bigger and things like that. But then the unfortunate thing when they get to like under 16, under 17, is that they discover women. So
Mm.
the football tends to go
Those
to the
boys, yeah.
left a bit.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly does. Were you a midfielder?
I was a defender. I always played at fullback.
Ah,
So
really?
more of a stopper than a creator. But
Ah, yes, yes,
yeah,
yes, but still precious, counterattacks, and, yeah, the defense is always kind of the unsung hero, aren't they?
absolutely. Yeah. You don't get the golden boot at the end of the season for the
Mm-mm-mm.
number of goals he's stopped. It's
No.
always goes to the guy who got 15, 20 goals up front. But
Mm,
like you say, but without the rest of the team, he can't perform. And if you
that's
like,
right.
that's the same in cybersecurity. Without having a framework, without having getting the ball from the defence to the midfield, from the midfield up front, you're not going to win anything. And
That's right.
teams have tried in the past. Real Madrid went through a season of signing up something like 8 forwards, and they got hammered every week because they couldn't stop the
Yes.
things coming the other way. So you've got to get the balance right.
The best offense is a strong defense,
Yeah,
Mark.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I like what you said about getting, so I coached my daughters, right? They're in their 20s now. They stopped playing after
Yeah.
high school at they're 16, 17 years old. And there was always the case, I don't know if you've ever seen this, like when they were young, there was some of the kids that were there that really didn't want to be there, but their parents kind of made them, so you
Yeah.
did your best to kind of, make it fun. And I could remember like when they were 6, 7 years old, and a girl would fall and she would look up to see everybody's reaction, because if there was sympathy, she'd start crying. It was, okay, come on. It's just like life. You fall down, you get back up, so I kind of
Yeah. Exactly.
move them
Yeah.
along. And hopefully it's such a great team sport, and it just develops such great team chemistry that I think you just carry it for the rest of your life, soccer.
Yeah. 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 And it's communication skills. You have
Mm,
to be able to talk to people. And like you say, you don't have to like them, but you got to work with them. And in real life, you've got to work with people. You might not like them, but you've got to respect what they bring to the table in form of the skills that they have,
mm,
which are the skills that you don't have, hence you're complementary.
there you go. It's interesting, Mark. I'm not sure how it is there, but here in the States, the kids were always great. It was like one or two parents that were the pain. Similar there?
Yeah, I can remember a story we had where one of the ladies was actually having she was having a real go at the referee, because that's who they tend to pick on,
Yeah.
screaming and shouting. And in the end, the referee, or the manager, I think, walked over to her and said, "Do you know the offside rule?" And she went, "No." He went, "Well, shut the hell up then. Let us get on with the football."
She didn't understand all sides. Yeah, excuse me. I would have meetings with the parents 2 or 3 times a year, and I remember it was at the second meeting or something. One of the fathers said, I said, "Parents, do you have any questions?" And all the kids are there, and the excuse me, and the father said, "I think we should do better on corner kicks. We should be able to have more goals on corner kicks. We're missing this great opportunity on corner kicks. We should have more goals." And I said, "Oh my goodness, girls, this is great. We are now going to dedicate, 15 minutes every practice to corner kicks. And now that Mr. Smith has volunteered to coach us on that,
Yeah,
he will then
exactly.
take you and we will, and then he will instruct everybody how to work these corner kicks. This is going to be so excited." And he just kind of stepped back,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
never heard from a parent again. You know what? Once once you kind of say, "Okay, you have it," then you're going to come and show us. And it
yeah,
was never the case again. I just put kind of, "Okay, let's do it. Let's see what you
yeah,
have."
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, everybody's a World Cup winner until
That's right. That's right. You were laying fiber in the underground trains in London, Mark. Tell me what that was
yeah.
like. They're all
It was
unmanned.
it was it was quite surreal because they were still building what's now the London Light Docklands Railway. They call it a DLR, and the trains are unmanned. And what they were doing was, as I say, as they were building the stations, they were rolling out fiber optic cable, and it was my job to put to put the connectors on the end. But
Wow.
it was so long ago that you literally glued them fiber by fiber, and then you used a heat gun, which looks like an
Hair
industrial
dryer?
heat gun, like a hairdryer, to
Yeah.
cure the glue, and then you polished the end of the connector, and then you had to put an optical time domain reflectometer on that to get a bounce back to see what the delay was. And what we were doing was we were actually linking up the video cameras. So you need to be able to see, that obviously the voltage drop or that the signal wasn't going to drop below. I think it's 1 volt peak to peak for a video. So it was, it was interesting because you got to see the Docklands Light Railway before it was built.
Mm,
And I know where all the secret cabinets are and things like that. So, um, but now it's funny because you go to things like InfoSec or all the big exhibitions now in London
sure.
are at the Excel Centre in London, and to get there you have to use the DLR. So it's
Huh.
quite interesting because I go past things and I go, oh, I know what's down the bottom of there, and I know what's over there
Wow.
as you approach the stations. So yeah, and yeah, got to see some called out to some strange places. I did one. I'm pretty sure, yeah, still is the only helicopter ride I've ever had, and
Huh.
that was to go right to the north of Scotland, and then get on a helicopter and go to one of the islands off of Scotland, which was a military base. And once again, to terminate a fiber optic cable, and the camera wasn't allowed to go above the horizontal. And what they were looking for was Russian submarines.
Wow.
So it's like, yeah, it's some strange and interesting places. Yeah.
Wow. And you were doing all this in the 80s.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there was no World Wide Web. There was no
Not
email. I
no,
mean,
not web. There was internet was relatively like a dial up.
right.
I could tell by the noise how far away. So it was going beep, 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 beep. I knew I had like 3 seconds to get back inside because you could leave the room while it was dialing, and you could tell when the connection was going to
Wow.
be made. So yeah, that
Wow.
was strange
Yeah.
times.
And
Moved a
so
lot quick. Yeah.
you call it the tube there. That's something different?
We call it the tube. You guys call it the
Subway.
the subway. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 It's the
I see.
underground network. So yeah, oldest one in the world, I believe, Victorian. So
London is.
the original ones, yeah, the original
Wow.
stations are. Yeah, but
Wow.
it's grown massively, obviously, since then, as you can imagine.
Yeah, what is the one stop there? 33 and a third for the Harry Potter stop there? Is that it?
Oh
No.
yeah, that's an overground station, but that's there's actually it's at Marylebone Station. There's a whole exhibition thing. You can go there, um, and
Ah,
they've made it that the Harry Potter experience. Yeah,
of course they
so
have.
they know how to cash in on these things.
Yes, yes, they're very smart about that. So you ended up going through some different areas, but you finally ended up in security with an XDR firm.
Yeah, I mean, the route to that really was sort of like my sales career was through doing networking, and I remember sort of like doing IBM Token Ring versus
Mm,
Ethernet, and obviously Ethernet won that battle, and I moved
yes.
from there into security as you know. I can remember selling antivirus separate to content filtering and things like that, and it's just naturally took me all the way through. Became a product manager for a big distributor over here that funded us into, or was funded by 3Com into
Recom, yeah.
the biggest value added reseller in the UK, a company called Computer Center, who are, I think they were the first $1 billion privately owned company in the UK.
Wow.
And they used to get massive contracts, but they used to um, you had to bid to be a supplier to them. They were that big.
Hmm.
So that was an interesting, and that just naturally led into security as networking. Um, you used to have networking companies and security companies. Well, as those companies effectively became one,
Mm.
and firewalls were standard stuff. That's where I started specializing was with Symantec. We used to sell the company I was working with. I ran a VAR who were a Symantec gold partner or whatever the partnership was there, and we were one of the only few that were allowed to sell their firewalls and things like that. And we were a specialist company. There was only about half a dozen of us in there, um, and that was based on Jersey in the UK. Um, and like I say, we used to do their firewalls, their intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, and stuff like that. So that's where the security thing was, and we were very much project driven because that's the way things were then. But
Right.
it was high margin because it was services, and from that we actually built a managed service business as well.
Hmm.
So it moved from just installing the stuff to managing it for clients. And then we expanded out into the UK mainland and Hong Kong. So there was a company out there called Evolution Security Systems Hong Kong, and there's still one in the UK called Evolution Systems. So, and then sort of from there through various iterations wound up contracting. Um, and one of the contracts I picked up, I'd obviously done a few, but the skill set really was bringing product into Europe that hasn't got a presence in Europe.
Hmm.
And the XDR company was one of those that I brought into Europe. They had a bit of a presence, or they tried previously and have failed. Um, so I picked that up and did that for a couple of years. And I was teamed up with, as it worked out now, with my co-founder, Randy Lasik. Randy is a technical guy, deep technical, ex-hacker. Um, some scary stuff, but knows his way around things, shall we say? And I was obviously based in Europe, Randy in the US. But anything when I did presentations and demos, I'd obviously do the sales demo and then line up Randy to do any deep dive technical stuff when the MSP came on with their technical team, and then they would just
Hmm.
trundle on, and so we wound up sort of working well together. Um, and one of the things that we kept coming across was XDR at the time, and the product at the time was relatively. There was only a few competitors in the market, shall we say, but there were people being bought up and people being amalgamated, and that
Mark,
pushed us
define
more and more.
XDR, please.
Sorry,
Define XDR. Yeah.
extended detection and response. Okay, so it's basically a one-stop shop for everything. So it's doing threat detection, threat prevention, sending you alerts, making those alerts sort of red, amber, green, and you can see it in real time, so you can respond to it before things happen. Um, and then sort of the bigger boys, it was something that normally you would find in like the big banks and insurance companies. They would have
Hmm.
those systems because they were just good hygiene to have when you're a company of that organization, that size. But it was filtering down and down and down into the standard marketplace, as we would call it, the SME. From an MSP's perspective, they could have multi-tenancy, so they could see lots of their clients on the one screen and manage those clients independently. Um, from our perspective, we were with a sort of like a small to mid-size company, and the big boys were eating our lunch. To be fair, you had people at IBM moving down the stack, and funny enough, CrowdStrike and
Hmm.
companies like that were taking part of our lunch. Um, and with the budgets and the resources they had, we were not really going to win when, reputationally, when people say, well, where's your support center? And you say, we've got one here and one there. And they ask the same question of IBM, and they basically go, well, which street do you want to be talking to, as
Mm.
opposed to which country? Um, but we were looking at maybe then doing something ourselves. And what we what we learned was, before anybody had these XDR platforms, what they were looking to do was they had to adhere to a policy of some sort. And that was being driven by the industry. That now means that, if you're in the States, for example, I know the SEC has a framework which, if you want to do anything in local government, or as we would call it, local government, whatever you guys call it, you have to be able to say, we have this um, accreditation, and it could be NIST. It could be, over here for NIST, we tend to use ISO 27001. But what people were doing, they were saying, okay, I've got my accreditation, or I know what I need. I'll now look at what XDR platform can cover the majority of what's required from this compliance. And that's how you were sort of getting measured, was, the compliance has 120 questions, or controls as they call them. How many of those controls does your platform cover? And they would make a selection, obviously, based on, that does 80% of it, that does 50%, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, the other things that they were always being asked for was, before you could even get that far, you needed to be able to provide security awareness training, because that would all. I don't think there's a framework that doesn't have security awareness training involved in it. And everyone asks for an up-to-date asset register. So you've got to know what you've got in your infrastructure, basically, and that's sort of down to software asset management as well as physical hardware and stuff like that. Um, Once you've got that all sorted, you can then measure against what XDR platform you wanted. Well, we looked at this and saying we were getting beaten up by the bigger boys, and we said, of those three markets, which one makes sense for us if we're going to start a business? Which one makes sense for us to go for? Um, there's lots of security awareness training out there. Lots of people doing it. Lots of good awareness training. There's a couple of guys on the PitchIT who do security awareness training. Um, Asset management and software management, again, at the time, there's a fair few of those. And again, I think there's people on the PitchIT that can do that. There wasn't anybody doing anything in compliance, not the way that we do it. Um,
Hmm.
and so we decided to do that. The other advantage from our perspective was, we knew the MSP world because I'd sold to MSPs in the past. Randy had built and sold a top tier in the, I think it's either top 5 or top 1% MSP. So he knew what MSPs, if from a technical level, required, and things like that. And he'd actually used ConnectWise as the basis of his platform anyway. So he was well ingrained in what ConnectWise can offer and things like that. We then obviously looked at it, and as an aside, Randy had been playing with AI for a couple of years. So when we like drew up our pros and cons of each opportunity, we just went, compliance plus AI equals a solution for us. And that's what we came out with. So we've got compliance plus AI equals a compliance aid. So that's where we are now.
You talked, Mark, earlier about token ring and Ethernet
Yeah.
winning over that. There was also at one time a big debate over TCP/IP, whether that was going to be the standard. I mean, that's a really old technology, but it's still used today
Yeah.
everywhere. And that
Yeah.
really maintained because Apple had their own, IBM had their own,
Exactly.
Microsoft had their own, network language, and just TCP. I forget what the Microsoft one was called, but it's amazing how those technologies, a lot of times the users just won. They said, we want this and we're going to use it. And the big companies just succumbed. When you were working with 3Com back then, I mean, I don't know who ended up buying 3Com. Was it Cisco? Where did 3Com go?
They went more into telephony, but they did get bought by someone.
Yeah, they're not around
And
anymore, but they were huge
the
in the
time,
90s.
sorry, at the time, my competitors were Cabletron, who became Synoptics, who became somebody else. I can't remember. I think they wound up in the HP bucket somewhere along the line.
Wow. Wow.
Um, yeah.
So you meet Randy, and he's got a managed service provider practice here in the States, and a top tier one. He sells them, but he's got this great deep security background. I've talked to Randy before, really interesting man. And so, like you alluded to, Mark, you came together and you made this compliance platform. Now, how does it? So when we talk about compliance with security, what do we mean by that?
Okay. What we each industry to be industry business whatever has to have some sort of cybersecurity regulation that adheres to. Clients are being forced to have it. So what there is there's something in the region of 140 cybersecurity frameworks in the world at the moment, and they're coming out on a daily
Wow.
basis, more or less. I know from the EU, for example, there's one about to be made mandatory in a couple of months' time called DORA. And if you want to work in the finance industry, or you want to, you're an MSP in the finance industry, throughout Europe, you've got to have DORA compliance.
Hmm.
Um, Even if you're in the US and you want to deal with financial companies in Europe, they're going to ask you for how far along DORA are you. Um,
Wow.
so that's what's sort of forcing things on. It's being driven by the end user community, which is also being driven by insurance companies. Insurance now for cyber is taken in the same way as your liability insurance is taken. You've got to have it.
Wow.
Um, Bit of an argument, I guess, as to whether the insurance companies understand what they're insuring, because they naturally assume things like, okay, you're a business of this size. If you get a ransomware attack, what's it going to cost me? They're not
Hmm.
necessarily thinking about the other side of what can happen in security. Like today, for example, it's not a ransomware attack that has hit CrowdStrike and all their clients. It's going to be downtime.
Hmm.
So how do the insurance companies deal with that?
Hmm.
Having a policy or a set of policy that are structured internationally in some parts that recognize enables you to be able to say, this is what we have done to mitigate as best we can whatever the incident was. The time you're going to get into trouble is when an auditor or someone comes down on you and says, show me your incident response plan, and you don't have one. Then your
Hmm.
fines start sort of multiplying by big numbers. So having a security framework is your first start, really, and it also gives you where you need to go. From our perspective, what we actually do is we take all the questions from the questionnaire, and as I said, questions are called controls, and we put those controls on our platform. If you've already got existing security documentation, which most people do have, might not be in any detail, but they
Hmm.
have something, um, we can ingest that information, whether it's old security policies, whether it's just general information that people have written, whether it's screenshots, because we're multimodal, so we can take information from pictures, whether it's information from ConnectWise data systems, any sort of security related documentation, we can ingest that onto our platform.
Hmm.
And then what the platform will do, there's sort of two or three phases, but the platform uses our AI model and it's specific to us. We've built it. It's not just Copilot. We use different techniques. So, one technique, for example, is called um, the tree of thought. And what that is if you and I, what people have got to understand about AI is like talking to a human. It's not like talking to a computer program. So with a computer program, you generally get like a one or a zero, a yes or a no. With AI, you get nuances. So, you and I have had a little conversation about soccer. Your view about how a right back should perform might be slightly different to mine. But
Hmm.
we're still looking at, the core is his primary job is to defend. Yeah. What he does after that, we may have different opinions on. And that's how AI works. Now, you go to any auditor and you ask an auditor a question, he'll give you an answer. You ask the guy sat next to him, he'll give you a very similar answer,
Hmm.
won't be exactly the same. And what you want to be able to do is ask lots of people to get, if you like, a consolidated opinion. And that's what the tree of thought does. It acts as if there's lots of auditors rather than a one to one conversation. So that's one technique we've used to build our AI model. We also go out and look at what AI has actually already knows about, we don't educate the thing. So we're not chucking back information into that pool. So, just from a security perspective, we're not doing that. And equally, from a security perspective, we don't store anybody's data. So we have no GDPR problems or anything like that. But once the AI model has done its bit, so you've uploaded the information, AI models read all that information, understood it, it then applies it to all of the controls in the framework. And if you like, at shot one, what that gives you is this is what you look like now. Yeah. So, okay, fine. I've got now a list of what I look like. What can I do with that? Well, you can print new policies out from there. So you've got an idea of where you stand. But phase two is to take that information now, feed it back, if you like, into the platform. If you've made any changes, that's fine. If you've found a big hole in your security posture, then you may have resolved that. You put that back onto the platform. The platform then does a full assessment, and it tells you then whether you're compliant, non-compliant, or partially compliant. And
Hmm.
we don't just give you, red, amber, green, red, amber, green. You get something like an A4 page of information, and because we use the tree of thought, what you get it's described as branches and leaves. So you wind up with like four branches, which are detailed explanations of where you are, what your problem is, and what you need to do about it. And then the leaf is a summary of that. And you copy that leaf onto the spreadsheet of questions, and that document then becomes your live working document. It also, once again, produces all brand new policies for you. And the final part is what we call a level up, which is you chuck it back at the AI, and it says, if you this is your work instruction for the next 12 months to maintain compliance. Yeah. Um, and we can deliver all of that in 48 hours. And the
Hmm.
normal time scale is anywhere between 3 months and a year, depending upon the size of the business you're dealing with.
So here in the States, we were really hit. The first real big industry here that we were faced with all these compliance issues was healthcare, right? And so we
Yep.
had something called HIPAA here, and I think it was
Yeah.
the Clinton administration, if I'm not mistaken. So that's 20 years ago. And
Yeah.
when I had my managed service provider practice, all my healthcare clients all of a sudden had to be HIPAA compliant. So we had a
Yeah.
I think we brought in consultants and then eventually kind of took it over, but it was a beast, Mark. There was
Yeah.
so much to it. And so now what you're saying is that every industry has a set of compliance that you have to go by. DORA, I've never heard of, but you're saying that's going to be
No.
very popular soon. So it's interesting. Do MSPs themselves have a compliance?
Well, that's the interesting thing, because there'll be things like SOC 2, which they should
Yeah,
be
that's
compliant with. And to
yeah,
be fair, they should have their own compliance as well, whether that is ISO 27001 or NIST.
sure.
They need to prove to their clients that they themselves take things seriously. And once again, part of what we do is we can get the MSPs through the compliance regulation that they need to adhere to. But equally, we can offer them the service so that they can offer it to their clients.
That's the
So
thing.
everything
Yeah,
we've done there is you can now offer it to your clients, and the depending upon how you offer it, you don't actually need a compliance regulator to do it, because the process of what we're saying to MSPs is your clients are being asked for um, some sort of regulation. And we've got one, for example, who's in the we're talking to, who's in the finance world. They deal with RIAs. I've got to be careful what I say, because over here, if I say IRA, it means something completely different. So
ah,
they deal with RIAs, and they've got sort of like, I can't remember if it's 3 to 5 or 5 to 7,000 RIAs on their books. Each of those RIAs has to adhere to a framework, and they're using NIST. We can turn those round, and we can do multiple frameworks at the same time. We can turn those round in 48 hours, and they've basically got a market there. And we've, based on the numbers that we think they've got and they were talking about, even if we hit 5% of their client base between now and the end of the year, that's in excess of $1 million just
Wow.
sat there, in a market that has to be served. And
So
what we're saying
NIST
is
and
we can run that for them. They don't. All we need from them is to say, get your client to give us that documentation, that security documentation that we spoke about
mm,
earlier. We're on the platform for them. We'll send it back either to the client if that's what the MSP wants to do, or via the MSP. We're not going to go direct. We always go via the MSP. It's up. The MSP has that relationship. It's up to them how they want us to um, interact with their client. But the trustworthy thing is there that we're not going to go start stealing clients. It's not,
of course, that's important to the MSP, certainly. But
yeah,
NIST and ISO are United States regulations, correct? They're formed by the government, or are those worldwide?
they're worldwide. But
Oh,
where you tend to find them, NIST you tend to find in the US,
I see.
ISO you tend to find in Europe and Asia,
I
but they
see.
are recognised worldwide.
Ah,
And that's sort of that's another thing that we can do. If you're a US company and you've got NIST, and you now have to deal with someone in Europe, or you open up a sister company in Europe, just upload your NIST documents to the platform, and we'll spit out the ISO equivalents
huh.
in 48 hours, and obviously vice versa. So
And
you'll then need to see where your differentials are.
and HIPAA, is that states or is that
Yeah,
world?
HIPAA's the States, but over here certainly in the UK, we tend to follow it as a framework of good practice.
I see.
So, as far as I'm aware, there's not a UK HIPAA equivalent. People have just sort of like adopted it by default because obviously if it works over in the States, it's likely to work over here with maybe a few nuances, changes, but that's about it. As a main course to follow, that we follow HIPAA.
How about all the spam those rules for email? Does
In
those fall into compliance?
They do, in the form of there will be a question or a set of questions in the framework which says, how do you deal with this? What
I
is your,
see.
do you have, or um, do you change your passwords on a regular basis? Do you have a password policy? If you answer no to that, when it goes through the wash and comes out the other end, that'll be a red mark to say you're not compliant. Here's what we
Mm.
recommend you do. You have a password policy which is X number of characters, blah, 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 or you use an automated generation, whatever the recommendation is at that point.
So here in the States, when there's an issue, an audit gets done, and there's an auditor that comes in and does an audit and then they pass or they fail. Does this happen in compliance as well? Do audits
That's
get
exact.
done?
That's
And by what
exactly.
agency?
There for certainly for the UK, there's a thing called UK authority. Can't remember what the full acronym is now, but they are authorised bodies. For NIST, there isn't actually an authorised body, but if you get breached, then someone from somewhere, maybe so the government that would deal with that side of it, will come in and say, what have you done about your access control policy, your incident response? Why did this get through? And they'll do their forensics on it. And if you can't prove that you've taken best endeavors to a certain extent, then you know you're going to get hammered, basically.
Hmm. So your firmware compliance aid is in the Connect Wives PitchIT competition this year. It's a great
Yeah.
incubator. I think there's 25 vendors. They all have to have solutions, that help manage service providers. What's your goal at PitchIT? What do you want to get out of it?
We want to basically get our brand out there. We are literally a startup. I've, which was talking to the other guys. I didn't realize when we were sort of like fortunate enough to be accepted that other people have been in business a year, 2 years. Some people it's their second attempt or third attempt or whatever, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but we are literally a startup. So for us, it's picking out the golden nuggets from the weekly meetings, uh, communicating with other people, getting our brand out there, being able to do things like IT Nation when we get to that point. And so for us, it's really about building that community and understanding how other people are working in the community. And basically getting our brand out there. It's all about the marketing side of it for us on that side.
Hmm. And it's become compliance has become a competitive field. There was one or two players, and now there's many. What differentiates yourself?
Yeah, we would say that we are still very unique
Hmm.
because of the way that we do things. So we would like to. What we do say we're an AI first company.
Hmm.
So we have. We just did three again yesterday. So I think we've got nine, 10. We've got 11 um, people in our business. Nine of them are AI agents. There's only
Wow.
me and Randy are humans. Um,
Hmm.
yet we can do stuff using using the agents that make us look like
Interesting.
a 60, 70, 80 man company. So, for example, we have a client simulator agent. And what that does is that client simulator can take on multiple personalities. So, if we want to run a test past um, a company that would be a legal firm, we can program that AI agent, this client simulator, to emulate how a lawyer would answer these questions. And then a day later or however long later, if it was, we can do the same for construction. We can make him look like a construction guy. We can make him look like an MSP. So that's how we're getting sort of our feedback things and things like that. And equally, we have a prompt engineer. So Randy will start the prompts,
Hmm.
and the engineer will, then pick it up and refine them and keep going. But so, from an AI first perspective, that's where we are. Where we're different is we get put into the government risk and compliance framework, framework market. That's where people think that we are. Now, we would say that we are pre GRC in that what a GRC platform generally does is it maps, and it's got all the nice dashboards and stuff like that. It maps where you are along the compliance route, and it can do some wonderful things. Put dates in, give risk assessments against where etc. etc. So still needed. Not denying that, but they're more like a sat nav in that they tell you where you are at a precise moment in time. What we say is we're more like uh, a group leader or a scout leader in that we've got the skills with the compass, the map. We lay out the roadmap for you. We show you where you need to go, and you know where your end goal is going to be. So that's what we're more like. And
Hmm.
when it comes to like the policies, when you have policies from GRC platforms, they tend to be templated, whereas our policies are specific to the client because at the end of the day, we've used their documentation to create those policies. So what we are is we're a bit pre GRC in that respect because we don't have anything to put on a flashy dashboard where you can say what your progress is because literally you load up the data and you go down the pub for 2 hours because AI is doing the work, and you come back and there are your policies. You push the button and there are your policies, or
Nice.
you do it just before you leave the office. Go home in the morning, everything's sat there waiting for you. So it's not it's not a thing we have to keep monitoring it and managing it for months. As you said earlier, when you had the HIPAA guys or whatever coming in, and they were taking months and months to gather information,
Yeah.
read all that documentation, understand it, then try and apply it to the questions, then trying to find what the gap is, then write a policy to remediate the gap. We take all of that away. That's not longer, we still want the human in the loop because when it comes to looking at our answers, the way we've tested our product is we get a human auditor for that particular framework to check our answers. And they come back with their comments. We refine the model. We get them to check it again. We refine the model. We get them to check it again until they're satisfied that a human would give a similar sort of answer. And what we're at, dependent upon the quality of the information that we get, we're at about 75% accuracy of a human auditor, which means they've got 25% to look at because if you've got 100 questions and 75 of them are comply, 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 and I don't know, 15 of them are partial compliant and 10 of them are non-compliant, from an auditor's point of view, you're going to focus on those 25. Those that are partially compliant, you can then look at. And the thing with AI is it tries to be well, it would attempt to answer every single question on the framework. So if a question has multiple parts to it, say it has 4 parts, the documents you sent us, when it's done its iteration, worked out how it's applied its answer to that question, it might say part 3 is no evidence that from the documentation that you have this, we recommend that. And part 4, it might say there's no evidence of this, blah blah blah. Now the human might look at that and say, well, because you'll get partially compliant because there were answers to parts 1 and 2. The human can look at that and go, well, I know this company, they're only a 2-man band, they're not going to have this stuff. So the things that you didn't see are irrelevant. I can upgrade that answer from partially compliant to compliant. So we still need that. But the good thing is, even the non compliant, you at least get a reason why it's non compliant. So the
Mm.
human looking at it doesn't have to go back through all that document and find out why it's non compliant. It's saying it's non compliant because we couldn't find a reference in this part, or we couldn't see any data in that part. Or as I say, it's partially compliant because there's no evidence of these 2 parts. So even at the human level, they're not having to trawl through all that data to find it. They know where to focus to look for the answers as to why it's partial or non-compliant.
Yeah, I didn't realize it could be partial compliant. I thought you either were or you weren't. That's very interesting. So to make up for it, it'll explain how. So Mark, I started my MSP in the 90s. I was working way too hard, working long hours and not paying attention to myself and eating poorly, drinking too much sugar, etc.
Yeah,
Before you know it, I found myself at 340 pounds, right? So the doctor said, if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. She was just born. So I took the next 6, 7 months, and I changed everything I did, and I lost about 130 pounds, and I kept it off. You can't look at losing weight as a finish line, right? You got to kind
no,
of keep at it and change. So people want a one word answer. How did you do it? What was your secret? And I always say just discipline, Mark. I
absolutely.
developed a routine. I got some direction. I had willpower, which all I feel falls under discipline. I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life, Mark.
Yeah, 6 o'clock every morning, I get up and I do something.
Hmm.
As we said earlier, I started off as a soccer player.
Yeah.
Football left me. I then started coaching, and probably a bit like yourself, I thought I was keeping fit by coaching
Hmm.
kids. Yeah, and I just sort of one day thought, I'm going to go for a run. I couldn't get from my house 100 meters down the road without my lungs feeling like they were burning, and my legs just felt like, and it's like, hellfire, what's happened to me? I didn't feel ill. I didn't look ill.
Hmm.
It's just, this is just not me. So I live not far from the sea, literally 200 meters. If I went 300 meters, I'll be up to my knees in water. And
Wow.
I have a castle, which is the best Norman preserved castle in the whole of Europe, which is
Wow.
part of where I live as well. So I started to build myself up, think if I can just run around the castle and come back home, that'll be plenty.
Hmm.
And I started doing that, and it's like you say, it's nice fresh air. Get up early in the morning. There's no car fumes or anything like that.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
running along the seafront. I can look across the Portsmouth dockyard.
Nice.
Portsmouth dockyard used to be the main base for the British Navy, and I can see sort of like different ships every other day. So the scenery's changing and gives you a
Hmm.
chance to sort of fresh air. But I went from there, just wanted to keep my heart and lungs going, um, to running marathons. And it's
Yeah.
like, now am I getting obsessive and go on
Hmm.
the other end because
Hmm.
I'm likely to wear my
Hmm.
knees out? My heart and
Hmm.
lungs could be the best on the table, but I've got no
Hmm.
kneecaps. But it was all about just making that plan. And like I say, to get to the marathons, I did a thing. I don't know if you have it in the States. I'm sure you have something similar. We have a thing called Couch to 5K. And well, the description is you get off your couch and in 9 weeks, you'll be able to run 5 kilometers, yeah, or
Nice.
run for half an hour non-stop. And it's a 9 week program. You do it 3 days a week. And it starts off with a 10-minute walk. And it's like a 30-second jog, 30-second walk. And it just builds and builds and builds. And they've
Yeah.
got some great apps where you can get different people coaching you. And you can have funny people coaching you, athletes coaching you. And so so I started doing that. And that's, as I say, I went from doing 5K to 10K and then half marathons. And I did the London Marathon and the Brighton Marathon.
Wow.
Nowadays, I'm, and that was an odd thing. I did the London Marathon in something like 2010, I think it was. 2 years later, I did the Brighton Marathon in exactly the same time, two completely different courses.
Wow.
And I was absolutely annoyed because I'd rather have been 5 minutes slower or 5 minutes quicker. It's like,
It's exactly
how
the
the hell
same
did that
time.
happen? I got beaten by an Italian with one leg, and I got beaten by Elvis Presley. So I was, I was like,
Could be worse.
yeah, yeah. But um, now my knees are pretty shot. I only try and do 10K because
Right.
that's quite a nice distance in that it's 6 miles.
Right.
I can do it in about an hour and a bit. So I can get it done, get showered in the morning and sit down ready for work and everything's in your head, you're
Mm,
all up and
mm,
ready. But I've got a knee problem at the moment. But so what I do at the moment, literally yesterday morning, and I've got to go out tomorrow, I've got a push bike. So I just get on my bike and I'll get up at 6 o'clock in the morning before the traffic's anywhere near troublesome, and I'll cycle for 10 miles and be back home, like I say, showered and ready to go. So I try to do something, I guess, is what it all comes down to, rather than, and I get frustrated when I can't. When I get
mm,
injured, I'm one of these people who probably doesn't let the injury completely heal before I'm back
mm,
doing stupid things again. But
mm,
that's the discipline. It's setting it up, getting used to doing it to the point where your rest days become as important as your exercise days, and that's the same in business for me. You can work 15, 20 hours for so many days, and then, as you say, it's not the hours you do, it's what you do in the hours, and you have to take time
mm.
off to let yourself just heal, and then you can do more in the hour a day later.
Yeah, you certainly do. The running is so it's nice, it's refreshing, you get that runner's high, but there's a point, just like in soccer, where your body starts telling you you have to move to
Yeah,
something else.
yeah, yeah. And I there's a particular 10K I used to do every year in London for cancer research. Um, and it's funny looking, I still think I can run sort of 9.5, 10-minute miles. And when I look back
Ooh.
on it, I probably could when I was 27, 28. I'm 61 now, but in my head, I'm still going to hit that 10-minute mile marker. And when you can't, because you have to dedicate too
Yeah,
much time to it if you want to do that.
you do.
I've got to become a jogger rather than a runner. So
Mm,
just get
yeah.
out, cut the distance down. Like I say, I don't need to run a half marathon or a marathon to keep my heart and lungs going. And that was the primary focus when I started out years ago. Was, like I say, I ran 100 meters and thought the world had collapsed on me. So just to be able to do 3 miles, we do a thing, park runs over here in the UK and Europe as well. And you can do them anywhere. They're organised events and they're 3 miles, but you get a barcode and you can do things, and it's all voluntary. So,
Nice.
every Saturday morning, 9 o'clock in the morning across the whole of Europe, people are doing park runs. So
Wow.
that makes it, and it is. It's meant to be a fun run. You can walk it, you can jog it. The running club that I belong to, we do a couch to 5K course, and then we do a park run as their graduation.
Hmm.
So because the park run is 5K, so yeah, and like I say, it's a social thing to do when you're with a club. But if you want to go on your own, you have that opportunity to take time out yourself as well.
Yeah, they have those here, and you see people jog. You see people pushing like baby strollers
Yeah,
too. I mean, it's great. I mean, it's you just have to get out there, And even I've become in my older age, I've become a golfer, right? And I like to walk. I like to push a
yeah,
cart, and still, if I hurt my knee and I can't walk, Mark, I don't. That's no fun, And
absolutely. Yeah,
you just have to. I'm a little bit younger than you, but you just have to really, really listen to your body, let yourself heal. What
yeah.
motivates you, Mark?
Um, I don't know, really, just life in general. I mean, I enjoy life. I've got two kids. Been
Yes.
married. Let me get this right. 35 years. I've got two boys, and I'm very proud of my children. Very proud of my wife. But with my kids, you couldn't get polar opposites. I've got
Right.
my oldest son went left home at 16. Um, to go to a military college, and he did his A levels, as we call them here, at a military college, and he was selected to go there, which was a great thing to happen. Um, and it was strange because you turn up at the college and they'd make great pains to say we're just like any other sixth form college. Sixth form for us over here is 16 years to 18 years,
I
as
see.
an age group. And I'd go to the guy and said, "You might well be, but every other sixth form college I've been to, I never see people walking around in uniform carrying guns." And he
Mm. Mhm.
okay, I take your point. So, but he went from there to university, sponsored by the Army, British Army, and then to Sandhurst. And Sandhurst is the same as West Point.
Ah,
So he came out of there, and he's a Royal Engineer in the Army, and he's now a major. So I've got one guy who, everything. If he turns up for an appointment, he's like me. I have to be an hour early for an appointment,
yeah,
or
yeah.
if I turn up 15 minutes, I feel like I'm early. I feel like I'm late. So I
Mm.
got one son at that end of the spectrum, and my youngest son is a jazz musician by trade. He teaches, and he teaches actually languages. He left home after going to university, and he was selected to go to a conservatoire. And there's only 5 in the country. Um, and he majored on jazz trumpet, and he went from there and did what we call an Erasmus over here, where you can swap colleges for a year and go to a foreign college. And he chose to go to Valencia in Spain and did a year out in Spain. And basically, to all intents and purposes, never came back.
Mm.
He finished his degree and went back to Valencia. His fiance is Valencian, and he teaches English to Spanish children and Spanish to English children, and plays jazz. And for him, if he's a minute early to an appointment, you owe him a minute of his life. So I do get the complete opposite. And you're sort of like, the boys get on really, really well together, which is strange because you would think one would be, don't drop that, don't do this, don't do that. And the other one would be, oh, I'm getting out of bed when I want to get out of bed. I don't care when you say I've got to get out of bed, But no, they get on like a house on fire. So, that sort of motivates me. I've got my first grandchild, which is interesting because you can have fun with the grandchild and then give it back.
And leave,
So,
yeah.
you know, that makes it fun. So yeah, just life in general, I suppose, trying to keep everything spinning.
And so given that, how do you measure success?
Oof. I think success is primarily just being happy. I don't set goals that I think are unrealistic, and
Mm.
it's nice to have a big goal and then break it down. But just trying to be happy and moving myself and the family forward from, if you like, when my parents gave me a start and things like that. So just being able to take the next step forward and the next step forward, and seeing that next generation coming through with the a few more advantages than the ones that I had, and I see I had more advantages than the ones that my parents had. So
Mm.
it's setting them up to set the right example is where I see my success, if you like, from a personal level. On a business level, success is getting the brand awareness out there, getting the business in, being able to help people move their businesses along. We'd love to have MSPs selling compliance aid and making high margins out of it with very little effort, and being able to take that forward for themselves and being able to offer them the opportunity to move into different spaces.
Mm. Very cool, Mark. Well, I thank you for your time. I was excited when we set this up. I know we have similar passions,
Yeah.
and we would have a lot to talk about. Anybody listening, how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. Our website obviously is www.thecomplianceaid, and it's AIDE.com. We're also running an award scheme where we've got a $30,000 award, which what we're looking for in return for that is basically to get your logos on our website. Because I say for us at the moment, it's about brand awareness.
Mm.
Once again, you can go to the website and click on the award thing at the top right, or go to www.thecomplianceaid.com/access request. That will give you 5 NIST alignments and security policies that you can do one for yourself. And then what you do with the other 4 is entirely up to you. You can sell them, or you can use them as an incentive to bring clients on board. It's a self-assessment portal. So you will need security documents. If you haven't got security documents, just give us a call, and we'll send you a security questionnaire. And then once you fill that in, you have some security documents. That security questionnaire is quite in depth. It's one that the UK government recommends. So you can use it as an onboarding document. Is where we've seen it used before. So you give it to your client. If they've got no documents, they can look at it and go. You can receive it back, and then as the MSP, you can go, "Oh, these guys don't have an awful lot. Maybe they're too much of a risk for us to take on." Or you can also look at it and go, "Oh, we should be supplying these services." So yeah. So through the website is the short answer to get to us.
The Compliance Aid, as you said, AIDE. You're
Yep,
Mark H at
I am.
thecomplianceaid.com. You're on
Yep,
LinkedIn as well. Mark Heather,
yep,
Heather. We'll make sure to put it in the show notes. Mark, I
sure.
look forward to meeting you eventually. I'll probably see you at
Yeah,
IT Nation. Perhaps we'll have a drink.
yeah. Well, that would be handy. And
Yeah,
then
by
we,
then,
then, then we can
go
say
ahead.
we're going to go for a run, but no, we're not.
That's it, probably not. They do have a nice run then, but that's going to be in November. But by then, Man City will probably be 10-0, I would think.
Oh
By then.
no, no. I'm a Portsmouth fan, and we just got promoted from League One to the Championship, so we're below
Congratulations.
that. But if I was a
Yeah.
Premier follow-up, I would be following Liverpool as my Premier side.
Ah,
So
great,
yeah,
great, great team. Yeah. Mark, thank you so much. You have a good one.
thanks a lot, Joe. You too.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations.